I've always had a passion for Western-based games because they're not something that are super, abundant in the gaming landscape. When you think of games that are, Westerns that are really popular, you think of really Red Dead Redemption or just Red Dead Revolver in general, the Red Dead franchise as a whole. But one of those other franchises, guys, that I think got not as much attention as Red Dead was Call of Juarez, which, guys, in my opinion, this was a pretty exciting game, and it spanned from 2006 all the way to 2013, and I think that this is a franchise that deserves to coexist with other Westerns out there in the gaming world. So let's talk about what happened to Call of Juarez, and as I said, guys, this series started in 2006, and it seemed like as the games went, there were, the reviews and things of that nature were, they were pretty good at first. And to be quite honest, I mean, we had a decent amount of not only good reviews and reception, but even the sales for this franchise were pretty good as well. You start off with the first game that, of course, came out for Call of Juarez in 2006. And honestly, guys, when you look at the reception of these games, they were pretty good, sales-wise as well. So you had 8 out of 10 from Eurogamer, you had GameSpot 7 out of 10, from IGN 6.8 out of 10, 7.5 on Xbox 360, so pretty good reception overall. The sales, the game did not sell well in North America. According to the MPD group, it sold only 137,000 units across both PC and Xbox 360. However, its European sales were considerably better, with Techland crediting the game as putting them on the map as a globally recognized developer. Overall, the game sold well enough that Techland and Ubisoft established a Call of Juarez franchise. So obviously, it kind of kickstarted it, right? The very first game, I mean, it wasn't like super popular, but it was pretty good, probably from good reception and just, good reviews and such, and then pretty good sales, right, for a very first game, even though it didn't sell extremely well in North America. Look, then it kind of started this franchise, and we went to Call of Juarez Bound in Blood, which was the second game in this franchise, and I thought this is where it really got its footing. This is the first one out of the franchise I really kind of got into, was Call of Juarez Bound in Blood. And I thought that this got it got really good reception in my personal opinion. It got generally favorable reviews. I mean, you look on the board, guys, you have IGN giving it 7.7 out of 10. Eurogamer 7 out of 10, GameSpot 8 out of 10. So pretty good, pretty good reviews. Ultimately, the sales for Bound in Blood was a commercial success, selling considerably more units than the original Call of Juarez, according to figures from the MPD group. In its first 4 days of North American release, the game sold 24,000 units on Xbox 360 and 20,000 units on the PlayStation 3. In the United Kingdom, it entered the charts at number 6, but rose the following month to number 4. The game ultimately sold roughly 1 million units worldwide across all systems, making it one of Ubisoft's best-selling titles for the first half of the fiscal year. Although their overall sales were down 52% from 2008, having earned $247 million by November compared to $511 million of the previous year, they cited the strong sales of Bound in Blood and Anno 1404 as high points. So Bound in Blood, guys, this was kind of like that one of those games where it just felt like things were going pretty good at this point. I mean, obviously this was I would say that the incline was at full swing with Bound in Blood. Then came Call of Juarez, the Cartel, which I think we can probably all agree that this was probably the lowest point of the franchise, and there was a big question mark whether they were even going to make another one after Call of Juarez the Cartel, because this one had generally mixed to negative reviews, guys, from game rankings and Metacritic. Metacritic gave it 51 out of 100 for PC, 47 out of 100 on 360, and on the PS3 a 45 out of 100. That is not good at all. Those are pretty negative reviews, guys. The game has also been accused of racism and insensitivity toward real-life events, addressing issues such as human trafficking and the current drug wars in Mexico with flippant inaccuracy, particularly their having swapped the victims of such trafficking from being Mexican women shipped to the U.S. to U.S. citizens being abducted to Mexico. James Portnow of Extra Credits has criticized a level in which the player is awarded an achievement for killing 40 or more enemies on the only level where there are African Americans and no enemies other than African Americans, adding this might be the most racist game I've ever played by a major publisher. And guys, this was the I mean, the pitfall of this franchise, in my opinion. I don't know what they were thinking. And when I say they, guys, I mean, really Techland, when they made this game. I thought that underneath everything, all the controversies and things of that nature, I thought that there was something special here with this game, but just the way they went about it was just wrong, in my opinion. And I thought that from such a significant incline with the Bound in Blood, this is where that fall happened. And look, guys, we always talk about this on the YouTube channel, that every franchise has, peaks and valleys. And this was certainly a valley, guys, that was going straight downhill. And then, of course, Gunslinger came out, guys. And this game came out in 2013, which so a couple years later, and I thought that this was kind of rewriting the ship, so to speak. I thought that the reception of this one was very good, was very positive reviews. I thought it was a really good game. It was probably my second favorite to Bound in Blood. Got pretty much 7s and 8s out of 10s, guys, across the board. And in my opinion, this was a very well put together game. Now, ultimately, guys, what happened to Call of Juarez? Well, I really think, guys, that Call of Juarez, the cartel, is the game in which really hurt this franchise for the foreseeable future. Even with Call of Juarez Gunslinger coming out, I think that there was such a bad taste in so many people's mouths regarding that game previous to Gunslinger that people just didn't even buy Gunslinger, and I think it actually harmed the sales there as well. Ultimately, guys, the other thing was that Call of Juarez Gunslinger was a single-player only experience. The cartel had multiplayer experiences, and look, they kind of went back and forth, right? But all in all, Call of Juarez not only had a single-player experience, it had a multiplayer experience. So there was more ways than one to connect with the franchise, and Gunslinger only had a single-player experience, which I think a lot of people didn't like. I think people wanted to be able to play multiplayer because a first-person Western shooter, guys, that's not something that's been, really, really popular in today's gaming. And so this was a game I think that definitely deserves to coexist within gaming as a whole. But I think that the backlash of the cartel is really what hurt this franchise moving forward. Now, will we ever see Call of Juarez, a continuation of this franchise? I do think it's very possible. Now, when we look at kind of the ins and outs of everything, guys, there is a lot of question marks around this franchise. Does Ubisoft want to make a chance on it, or Techland, do they want to continue making these games? There's a lot of, big time question marks here, but when discussing Call of Juarez, guys, I'm going to be kind of reading from an article, pieces of an article written by Ethan Butterfield of GameGrin. Now, he wrote this a while back, guys, but I think it's still pretty relevant. Now, when discussing Call of Juarez, an interesting thing to point out about this franchise is the amount of praise it had before vanishing. Usually, a series has a couple of bad apples before kicking the bucket, but Call of Juarez is different in that regard. The last entry to the franchise, Call of Juarez Gunslinger, was seen by fans and critics as being overall well-made and a welcome addition to the series. With that being said, let's go through a bit of gaming history to see where things went astray. Kind of went through all of that, guys. Went through the prequels. We went through, of course, all of these games, like each game in particular. Now, one thing to mention is that Techland are the makers of Dead Island and Dying Light. So remember that, guys, that they are probably also working on other titles outside of Call of Juarez. So that's something that you also have to think about. Obviously, Dead Island's going to be a new addition to Dead Island, a new Dying Light. So you always have to kind of remember that these developers aren't only a lot of times working on just one IP. So that's another thing to really keep into consideration moving into, the future. Now, as far as where did things go wrong, take a shot in the dark. I'd like to think it was lack of interest overall. Call of Juarez has always been a popular franchise, but like Bulletstorm, popular things don't always sell. This is especially relevant due to the fact that Gunslinger couldn't garner a full box console release. Now, I've heard rumors that there is a new Call of Juarez waiting in the wings, but we'll have to wait and see if things pan out the way they do. So, look, I agree with that. I mean, Gunslinger, that was the thing. You know, not only is it only a single player experience, it didn't even get a full box console release, so that's another thing. So it just had a number of things that just went wrong. And even though it was very much so welcomed in the Call of Juarez franchise, but after the Cartel, you had Gunslinger, which of course people really liked, but it just didn't, you know, the marketing and such just really wasn't there like the other games. And on top of all of that, guys, you know, Techland's working on other games as well. Will they ever return to Call of Juarez? I think they will, guys, especially on the next generation of consoles. I think there's a real opportunity and possibility to really right the ship in the right direction, even though I think Gunslinger kind of started that. Continue moving in that direction, in a positive direction, single player, multiplayer, and some co-op modes. And there you have it. I think you're going to have a really good Western first-person shooter on your hands. But let me know what you guys think in the comment section below about what happened to Call of Juarez. Would you like to see a continuation in this franchise? Or do you think it just needs to be laid to rest, so to speak? Let me know what you guys think. And for more Call of Juarez content and videos, stay here with Zero TV.